Chapter 6. Abby had been gone for the past 5 hours. Zoran was frustrated at her insistence to go alone. He walked with her down to a building containing an oddly shaped transport. She assured him she would be perfectly safe and asked him to keep an eye on Gloria and Beau for her until she returned. She explained where he could find food and drink, showed him how to operate a thing called a microwave, and gave him a remote if he wanted to listen to music. She apologized for not having a thing called a TV, explaining she didn't care to watch it, but he could look at the computer if he wanted. Zoran returned to his ship instead to contact his brother Curizan. They discussed his captivity and plans for attacking the Curizan military base where he had been held. He also communicated again with Keelan and Mandra about what had happened and the trade agreements he had finalized before his captivity. They would be trading some of their crystals for women to supplement the needs of the men on his planet. Abby laughed as she pulled down the driveway for the 40-minute ride to town. She was beginning to wonder if Zoran was ever going to let her leave. She went over all the things she could think of in the house to make sure he didn't starve while she was gone, but it took even longer to convince him she didn't need protection against whatever imaginary creatures he thought she might encounter. He wanted her to take some type of weapon he had with him, and was mad as hell when she laughed and said she didn't need it. Now she was running even later and would have to stop at the post office first if she wanted to get there before it closed. Abby rolled down the window after she got on the highway and turned up the volume on the CD player, singing as she drove. She actually enjoyed the drive to town along the winding roads. The scenery was beautiful, and the weather was perfect. She made it to town with a half hour to spare before the post office closed and pulled into a spot right up front. She had no sooner turned off the engine to her pickup truck when Clay's sheriff's truck pulled in next to her. Abby let out a frustrated sigh. She swore he had cameras set up to monitor for her arrival in town. Otherwise, there was no way he could know she was headed in. She really didn't want to deal with his advances today. She wanted to get her mail, stock up on some food, and get home as soon as possible. It was weird, but she already missed being with Zoran. "Hey, Abby," Clay said, getting out of his truck and walking over to where Abby was locking her own vehicle. "Hi, Clay. How's it going?" Abby asked as she moved toward the post office. "Good. I'm glad to see you were able to get out after that storm the other night," Clay said, holding the door open for her. "Thanks. Yeah, it was pretty bad, but it didn't take long for the electric company to get the power back on. I was expecting it to be much worse than it was," Abby said, moving to her post office box. "Did you have any damage? I could come up to your place and help you clean up if you need me," Clay said, watching as Abby pulled out her mail, picking out the green notices of boxes to pick up, and stuffing the rest of it in her bag without looking at it. No damage. A tree fell behind the barn, but it didn't hit anything. There were some smaller branches lying around, but it won't take long to clear those up. I need to pick up some stuff. It was nice seeing you," Abby said, hoping Clay would take the hint and leave. "I'll help you. How about going to the diner and getting something to eat when you're done?" Clay asked, following Abby to the counter. Abby let out a soft sigh. Nope, he wasn't going to leave her be. "Sorry, can't. I need to get back home before dark. You know I don't like driving at night." It was the same excuse she had been giving Clay for the past 4 years. Their conversation could have been recorded, since it usually went the same. Clay would ask her out, she would give him an excuse, he would follow her around, trying to change her mind, and she would smile and say maybe another time. "Hi, Mrs. Patterson. How's Harry?" Abby said to the postal clerk, pushing the green notices toward Alicia Patterson. She had been the postmaster for Shelby probably since the beginning of time and was the number one person to see for any gossip. The woman had to be at least 80. "Harry's fine, dear. Thanks for asking. Are you going to be in town for the festival this year? We so look forward to listening to you sing," Mrs. Patterson said as she reached under the counter to pull out the boxes. Strange to be getting men's clothing in the mail. Haven't seen any of this since your grandfather passed on. Are you seeing someone, dear? Abby gritted her teeth. She should have known Mrs. Patterson would have noticed where the items were coming from. Now, everyone in town would know Abby was ordering men's clothing. I'm not sure I'll be able to make it this year. I have quite a bit of work to do, Abby said, ignoring Mrs. Patterson's inquisition. Abby moved to pick up the boxes, but before she could, Clay grabbed them off the counter, reading the names on them. A dark flush colored his cheeks, and his eyes flashed with anger as he moved toward the door, leaving Abby no choice but to follow. Abby unlocked the door to her truck and opened the extended cab portion so she could slide the packages into it. Clay didn't say anything until she was done. Who you buying men's clothes for, Abby? Clay demanded softly. Abby frowned at Clay before answering. That's really none of your business, Clay. Clay grabbed Abby's arm as she moved to get into her truck. I think it is. I've been asking you out for the past 4 years, and you'll hardly give me the time of day. Who are you buying clothes for? Abby sighed. Clay, I like you as a friend, nothing more. You should know that by now. Please just leave it at that and find someone else. I don't want someone else, Abby. I want you. You live up on that damn mountain all alone. It's not safe. You should move into town. Clay moved closer to Abby, trapping her between his body and her truck seat. He twirled a long piece of her hair that had come loose between his fingers. You know I'm attracted to you. Why won't you give me a chance? Abby swallowed hard. Clay had never come on to her quite this aggressively. Before, it was almost a teasing game between them, one Abby had never really taken seriously. Clay, Abby began, but was silenced as Clay wrapped his hand around her neck and pulled her into him, kissing her deeply. Abby was so startled by the kiss she didn't even think to resist. Clay had never tried to kiss her before. Now, he was not only kissing her, he was doing it in the middle of the parking lot of the post office. A soft cough behind them caused both of them to jump. Abby looked over Clay's shoulder to see Mrs. Patterson grinning as she locked up the post office. Abby blushed. Now, everyone in Shelby and every county within a 50-mile radius would know the sheriff of Shelby got caught kissing in the parking lot. Abby felt like a teenager getting caught making out. I have to go, Abby muttered, pulling herself into the driver's seat of the truck. I still have to get groceries. Clay backed up with a grin on his face, tipping his hat to Abby as she pulled out of the parking lot. He had staked his claim on Ms. Abigail Tanner, and he knew Mrs. Patterson would help let everyone know it. Whistling, he walked over to his truck. Abby might not have said she would go out with him, but she had not resisted him when he kissed her. He was off tomorrow, so he might just make a trip up into the mountains. Abby had forgotten all about the incident with Clay by the time she was winding her way back up her driveway. She was thinking about Zoran and his golden ship. She couldn't believe that out of all the places in the world for an alien to land, it was in her own backyard. She wondered what her grandparents would have thought about him. Abby absently reached up and rubbed the gold around her neck. She could feel the thin gold chain warm under her touch. She knew the creature, or whatever it was, enjoyed it when she rubbed it. It would often try to wrap around her fingers, moving in and out. She was amazed at how fast she had gotten used to it. She wondered what it was like where Zoran and the gold creature came from. As Abby rubbed the gold necklace around her neck, flashes of images poured into her mind. She saw huge trees and creatures that resembled dragons in Earth's mythology flying through the air, gold armor covering their bodies. She saw a city of white rising out of the dense forests, surrounded by huge walls that towered high into the sky. Large crowds of men and women were strolling about what looked like a market, with the gold creatures taking on all kinds of shapes and sizes. She saw what looked like spaceships flying over the city and landing, while others took off. She saw Zoran naked and surrounded by lots of females who were rubbing on him. The gold necklace around her neck seemed to realize it shouldn't have shown her that image, and it quickly faded away. "Hey, no fair," Abby said, sucking in her breath as her heart beat wildly. She didn't even realize she was stopped in the middle of the driveway until the last image faded. She felt a wave of pain around her heart at the sight of Zoran naked with so many females. Obviously, he didn't lack for female attention. She would be damned if she would be one of his harem girls. It wasn't like it was likely to happen anyway. After all, he wouldn't be here much longer. She got the impression his family was on their way to get him. It would be better for both of them if she kept a distance between them. The kiss they shared this morning wasn't a big deal. Hell, Clay had kissed her too, and it didn't mean anything to her. She would just have to make sure it didn't happen again, with either one of them. Abby finished the drive up the mountain. Try as much as she could, the image of all those women rubbing on Zoran wouldn't fade from her mind. Abby bit her bottom lip as she prepared herself to face him. She wouldn't let him know she found him attractive. She would concentrate on her work. She found if she did that, it helped. It helped when her grandmother died, and it helped when her grandfather passed on. It would save her from making a fool of herself now. Zoran had been pacing back and forth on the front porch of the small cabin for the past hour. It was beginning to get dark, and Abby still had not returned. He tried reaching out to her, but his symbiot refused to answer his call. He growled, scaring Bo, who was playing with his tennis ball in the front yard. Bo immediately lay down and rolled over to be petted. Where was she? Why was it taking so long? Had something happened to her? He knew he should have gone with her. He should have insisted she take the weapon he tried to give her. What if she was hurt? He paled. What if she was being held captive? Or worse, dead? He shuddered at the thought, calling out to his symbiot again, almost frantically. He felt a wave of dizziness pass over him as it finally answered him. He growled, wanting to know why it hadn't replied before. Flashes of Abby driving down a road with the wind blowing through her hair flashed through his mind. He could hear her singing. His grin faded as he saw a man approaching Abby. The man appeared to be wearing some type of uniform. He couldn't hear the conversation between them, but he could tell from the look the man was giving Abby that he desired her. A deep growl exploded out of his chest when he saw the man holding Abby and kissing her. Zoran felt a flash of fury as the man pulled away from Abby, smiling at her. She had not resisted the man. Jealousy burned through him at the thought of Abby in another's embrace. She was his. Zoran's head jerked around as the lights from Abby's transport flooded the front of the cabin. Zoran growled again as he watched her pull up. The dragon inside him roared for him to claim her, to put his mark on her. Zoran was at the truck's door before Abby even turned the engine off. Abby laughed as he pulled the door out of her hands. Not in a hurry to help get the groceries out, are you? You know, most men run the opposite way when they know it's time to bring them in. Zoran was so lost in the haze of jealousy he didn't hear what Abby said. He needed to know if the images his symbiot sent to him were true. Zoran pulled Abby from the seat of the truck and into his arms, holding her close while he breathed deeply of her scent. The scent of another man still clung to her. A deep growl erupted from the back of his throat as his hand reached up to hold Abby's jaw still as he sniffed her. What are you doing? Abby asked, breathless. She thought it funny Zoran would react so strangely to her returning with groceries. She thought he must not have figured out how to work the microwave or make a sandwich and was just hungry. But the possessive way he grabbed her and the way he was growling told her he was upset about something. Zoran growled again when Abby tried to push him away, warning her not to resist. He could smell the other man on her skin. The thought of the other man's scent on his true mate was too much for the dragon in him. He had to put his own scent on her. Gripping her neck in his large hand, he brought his lips down on hers, crushing her in his arms as he tried to gain control of his jealousy. Abby resisted at first, fighting the possessive hold Zoran had on her. She didn't know what was wrong, but he was obviously upset about something, or he had missed her more than she had thought. Abby was just beginning to relax and respond to Zoran's kiss when the image of him naked with so many women rubbing on him flashed into her mind. Twisting her head to the side, she took a shaky breath before trying to push him away from her. "What is your problem?" Abby demanded. "I haven't been gone all that long, and even if I had been, you have no right to manhandle me." Zoran pulled back, glaring down at Abby. She was his. He was frustrated that he could not explain this to her. She had no right to allow another male to touch her. A Valdier male was very, very possessive of his true mate. He would not think twice about killing any male who even looked too long at his mate. For another male to touch her, mark her with his scent, was more than the dragon in him could bear. He wanted to kill the male. If Abby purposely tried to leave him for another, he would do whatever was necessary to stop her, even if it meant tying her up or locking her away until she realized she belonged to him. He would never let her go. In Abby's case, it was even more potent, because not only had he chosen her as his mate, but so had his symbiot, and, from the feel of it, his dragon. This was very rare. As the ruler of his people, he would be expected to produce many heirs, and only in a union where he, his dragon, and his symbiot accepted the female would this happen. "Mine," Zoran growled, as Abby tried to push him away. "Mine," Zoran roared, the dragon in him finally overcoming his control. Abby's breath caught in a gasp as she watched Zoran's face change. His eyes glowed with molten gold, and his pupils became long, narrow slits. As she watched, green, gold, and red scales began forming as his head began to shift into the form of his dragon. His hands began to elongate, turning into sharp claws. Abby heard the sound of tearing as his shirt split open and long, leathery wings appeared out of his back. A sound penetrated Abby's brain as if from a distance. It sounded like a whimper. That was the last thing Abby remembered, as everything faded to black. Zoran was so upset over the other male's scent on his mate and Abby's apparent rejection of him that he was unable to control his dragon any longer. He felt the change as it swept over him, enjoying the feelings of power and freedom as he let his beast free. What he had not expected was Abby's fear at his transformation. He saw her flinch as he roared out, and then the stunned panic as he began to shift. It was only when she collapsed unconscious in his arms that he realized just how much he had frightened her.